It's truly an honor to be here. Is the sound okay? It's truly an honor to be here as the Budget Division Director for the DLGF. I am very grateful to be in this role. I want to give you a little background for my history. I was working in the Controller's Office for the City of Bloomington, and a shout out to Monroe County back there, for 10 years. And the last 4 of those years, I was the City Controller. So during that time, we worked closely with the County Auditor. So I have a fairly good sense of your role, but I learn more and more every day. After the 10 years at the City of Bloomington, I worked for a financial consultant for local government units for 6 years, and I joined the department in December of 2014. And enough about me. I do have one joke for you. It's a numbers joke. So here goes. Why is the number 6 afraid of the number 7? And the answer is because the number 789. Groan. No more jokes, I promise. Going forward on the agenda, we're going to talk about the 2015 budget, which is going like gangbusters, as you know. We're almost halfway through the year. We'll talk about 2016 budgets, the timeline. We will discuss online notices, county reviews, non-binding recommendations, binding adoption, and protected taxes. Now, 2015, on-time billing for all 92 counties, which is a major accomplishment since we have not reached that goal since 2002. And if you may all be aware of that, but I want to say that while there are many members of the team, a lot of the responsibility rests on your shoulders, and we are all very grateful that we were able to achieve, the big team, were able to achieve on-time billing in 2015. A couple of things about sort of ongoing processes. You may have already been contacted by your field rep. We are requesting the homestead credit amounts for the 2008 HEA 1001. Those are treated somewhat like an excess levy amount, and they'll be allocated among the taxing units. If you have a positive balance in your fund, it'll be allocated among the taxing units and reduce their levy for 2016. So you may have already heard from them. If not, you will be hearing from them. Second, regarding additional appropriations, it's very important for those to come to us periodically. So your council adopts. You have to obviously wait for proof of publication, but if you could send those to us on an ongoing basis, we occasionally get a packet at the end of the year with appropriations throughout the year, and in some cases, you know, there may be a handful of appropriations for a single fund where there aren't sufficient funds, and it's a domino effect, so it can hurt you, certainly, if you wait until the end of the year. So that's my soapbox. In 2016, April 1st has come and gone. That was the deadline for submission of sales data to the Department Data Division. That's what we consider our first step in this long, almost year-round process of budgeting. May 1st also has come and gone, and that's the recommended date for ratio studies to be submitted. And I checked the map this morning, and we have approved 35 ratio studies, received an additional 16, so we're more than halfway there. Thank you. Next, June 30th. that's the last day for settlement. Most of you do that before June 30th, but that's what we would consider the final date. That date is also a benchmark where once you basically close out June, that data will be used to plug into your current year financial worksheet. And that is not quite available on Gateway yet, but we're working on it, and Matt may have mentioned that this morning, but that will certainly be available as soon as we can get it, and it will be available in June, no doubt. Next deadline for roll will be July 1st. That's when the auditor and assessor get together and balance the gross assessed values for the county. Now, July 14th is the deadline for redevelopment commissions to submit a letter to you and to us indicating whether there is excess surplus TIF assessed value that will be passed on to the units, and so you should be looking for that in mid-July. And while we're on the topic of TIF, before you can input your or load your certified net assessed values, you'll need to complete the TIF neutralization worksheet. It's almost ready, and I know it's in the review process now, so you'll be seeing that soon. And then once we approve your TIF neutralization worksheet, that number, the factor, the TIF factor, will be input in your computer system. August 1st is actually a Saturday. I apologize. So if you have a pen and a hard copy, I'd like you to change that to August 3rd. It's correct in the budget timeline, the budget calendar that's posted on our website. If you haven't received the revised calendar, I believe it went out on the 18th via listserv. If you don't have a copy of that, give me a call and I'll direct you to that, or send you an email copy. That is the deadline to submit the Pay 16 certified net assessed values, which I'll, from now on, CNAV. And those are submitted in Gateway. Again, they can be manually entered or uploaded, I understand, this year. But Matt would have covered that this morning. The submission of CNAVs generally rule how we approach our budget process. If a county has submitted their CNAV fairly early on time, we will start working, we'll look at the date of the CNAV submission and start working those counties based on the date that they submitted CNAV. So if you're early on time, you are going to receive your 1782 notices. That's the preliminary budget notice, and very likely you'll receive your certified budget order sooner than if you submit your CNAV late. Now, there are exceptions. Sometimes there are units within the county who have requested appeals, and that takes some additional time. So that isn't always true, but as far as preliminary field rep starting a county, it's based on your CNAV submission. So I know it's a big job, but that will help you out in the long run getting that on time. Now, again, on this slide, we say August 1st. August 1st is a Saturday, so the true deadline this year is August 3rd. Prior to submitting your CNAVs, I think most of you already know that you can reduce those values to create a cushion for any deductions that might be filed through the end of the year. Now, if that cushion for any single taxing district is more than 2%. In the past, you've had to submit a request to the department. That can be done through Gateway this year. So if a single taxing district is over 2%, there are often mitigating factors for that. Now, the next deadline, September 1st, is the deadline for taxing units to submit the necessary information to the counties or cities and towns, if applicable, for non-binding recommendation or for binding adoption. And the submission is completed through Gateway, and it's the taxing unit's responsibility to submit this information by the deadline. Now, I will say it's important. The deadline is September 1st. We ran into a little bit of trouble, I don't know if it was last year or before, where a county had gone in the evening of September 1st and printed out all of the worksheets. However, somebody in a unit was working late and submitted their budget and budget rate and levy online, and those were not included in that file that the county had downloaded. So we recommended that you wait until September 2nd to do that. And also, if the county is planning to do review early in the month, and for some reason that changes, please let your units know about any changes in your schedule so that they can update their budget forms accordingly. Next, September 13th is a Sunday. So if you have a hard copy, please change that to September 14th, which is the last possible day for posting the proposed budget, levy, and tax rates for your unit. We often call this the Budget Form 3. This is done through Gateway, and I'm sure those of you who are familiar with Gateway know that you start on certain forms, and that often will upload into the next form and upload ultimately into the 4B and 3. The budget notice, the Form 3, must be submitted to Gateway at least 10 days prior to the public hearing. And it's well, how can I say it? It's disappointing to think that sometimes that doesn't happen. We get Form 3s that were submitted 3 days before a public hearing. So that 10-day period is very important. For units subject to binding adoption, the appropriate, in your case, fiscal body would be the council. The council is responsible for submitting the budget notice, so that actually falls on your shoulders. Units this year can publish Form 3s in the newspaper if they so choose. However, that is completely optional. We will be expecting to review your Form 3 that's submitted on Gateway, and regrettably, we've had situations where the Form 3 was wrong. And this happened last year when there was a May provision for Form 3 to be advertised. If the budget Form 3 is wrong on Gateway, but right in the newspaper, we can't look at the newspaper. According to law, we are looking at your Form 3. So it's very important. Based on the number of errors, not a high number, but you know, it's gut-wrenching to see somebody who's got an error on their Form 3 that's going to hurt their unit. I do recommend that you have a second set of eyes, or maybe a third set of eyes before you hit that button. Just It is probably, you know, if not the most important form, it's one of the most important forms. The next deadline, October 1st, that's the last day for County Council to review and issue non-binding recommendations for taxing units on their proposed budgets, levies, and tax rates. October 23rd, that's the last day for units to hold a public hearing on the 2016 budget. And here's another 10-day period. The Form 3 must be submitted at least 10 days before the public hearing. The public hearing must be held at least 10 days before the adoption. November 2nd. November 2nd is the last possible day for budget adoptions. And when you have your adopted budget, those forms, all of the related forms, must be submitted in Gateway within 2 days. Online notices. This is an important tool for the taxpayer to be part of the process and know what's going on with property taxes. The department will provide, according to law, a phone number, and we'll have that online, a phone number for taxpayers to request printed copies, mailed copies of the Form 3. Again this year, counties need to run an ad in the newspaper with an internet address, which will be Gateway, where the official version of the Form 3s are available. And the ad must also include the telephone number where a taxpayer can get a printed copy of the Form 3. We request that you run this ad twice. Statute only requires you to run it once, but again, the second publication would provide taxpayers an additional opportunity to see what's going on with property taxes. And of course, this ad, since it's required by law, we will need copies of proof of publication. New this year is a subscription service for anyone to sign up to receive email alerts when a unit adopts their Form 3, or I'm sorry, submits their Form 3 on Gateway. You'll also receive alerts when a unit modifies the notice. You can access this subscription service either from the budget notices page, which I'll show you in the next slide, or you can get it from the DLGF homepage. Now, this is the budget notices page, and hopefully you've all had a chance to take a look at it. You can click on a county and get all of the units within that county and set up alerts for yourself so you know what's going on. Or if a taxpayer wants to, they can go in and put in an address and get alerts for the units that overlap their address. Now, the easiest way to do that is to first click on, and that's the lower red circle there, click on Alert Me for a unit, and a window will pop up saying that, asking for your email address. And you put that in, and then you can click additional units. If you want to receive those alert emails, you can click on all of the units within the county. And then it's very important, then on the upper right, there's a box where you have to click Save Subscriptions in order to have all of that saved in your account. So if you have any trouble with that, once you go in and take a look at it, try it out. Even if you just do, you know, your own township or something. If you have any trouble, just contact Gateway. Now, I said it was available through the budget notices page, and the web address is at the top of that slide. It's also available from our home page, and it's one of the buttons on our main page there. Now, council review. The information must be provided by the taxing unit, any taxing unit that has a proposed levy for the ensuing year. So this year, 2016, if they want a levy, they have to submit their information. For non-school units, the information is budget, tax rates, and levies. For schools, it is just the tax rate and the levy. And I think many of you know, but I know there are a lot of new auditors here today. With schools, again, it's slightly different. For non-schools, you are reviewing and providing a recommendation, or your council is. And for schools, you're actually just reviewing. Excuse me. But however, it's important that you document the schools. You're not issuing a recommendation, but you do need to document that you've reviewed that. Now, taxing units, it applies to all taxing units other than the county that are not subject to binding adoption. It includes all taxing units with elected fiscal bodies or boards, and it includes libraries with appointed boards if their budget has not exceeded the average growth quotient. If you have any questions about what units this applies to, talk to your field rep, or we have a list of the units in Gateway. The county responsibilities for non-school units: you review the proposed budgets, levies, and tax rates, issue a recommendation regarding the taxing unit's budget, rate, and levies. And these documents, again, you can, once they're all uploaded on September 1st, when you download it, you're going to get all of those forms, and they have to include the comparison to Indiana's average growth quotient and the county's average increase in non-farm personal income growth for the past 6 years. It also needs to include comparison to increases in other units within the county. And I believe that Gateway populates all of those fields. That's my understanding. Now, after the recommendation has been prepared, this information needs to be forwarded to the taxing units and to the DLGF. And if your evidence of doing the review, it becomes your minutes, we ask that you actually list out the units that you've reviewed and list out the recommendations individually. If we get minutes that say all of the submitted budgets, levies, and rates were reviewed and approved, we can't accept that. It has to be individual, itemized. Be sure before the deadline, make sure that that review has occurred for all the applicable units. And again, if you have any problems, contact your budget field rep or Gateway if it's a Gateway problem. Now, for schools, as I said, you review the proposed levies and rates, but no recommendation needs to be issued. Once again, you forward that to the taxing unit and to the department after it's been completed, and please document that you've reviewed the school levies and rates. Non-binding recommendations. If a unit fails to submit their information by September 1st, they will receive the lesser of the 2015 budget. That means you may have heard us say we've continued their budget, or if it so happens, and not often, but sometimes, the 2016 adopted published budget may be lower than 15, then they're going to get the lower of those two. If the county council fails to perform the review recommendation of any required unit by October 1st, the same thing would happen to the county. The lesser of 2015, or if 16 happened to be lower, that's the amount that you would receive. Be sure to document if a unit does not submit their information to you through Gateway. Include that in the documentation that such and such unit was not reviewed because the information was not received by the deadline. Moving on to binding adoption. Units that are subject to binding adoption include units with appointed boards. Now, if you happen to have a board that is partially appointed, partially elected, then it's whichever majority is considered the ruling factor. So there aren't a lot of those. I think I can think of a school corporation, but there aren't a lot of those. And also libraries with appointed boards whose proposed budget exceeds the average growth quotient, those libraries are subject to binding adoption. And that information, along with the non-binding units, the information is supposed to be submitted by the binding adoption units by September 1st. Now, the fiscal body, in your case the county, is responsible for those budgets. It basically falls on you. You have to take ownership of making sure that all of the notices are submitted and that the proper hearings and adoption processes are followed. Your county will conduct the public hearing, adopt the final budget, and the county council can reduce or modify the budget but not increase it, budget, levy, or rates, all of the three. The appropriate fiscal body officer, county auditors, serve as the submitter for budget forms in Gateway. And if you have units that you need to go in and take care of business for them, if you don't have submission rights, just contact the Gateway folks and they'll take care of that right away. Protected taxes. Protected taxes were implemented in 2014, and that term applies to debt service funds and to lease rental payment funds. And if you have a first mortgage bond or a lease rental bond, it sort of falls into that bigger category of debt service. But they are split out, well, both mentioned in the law. And the goal of having protected taxes is so that the circuit breaker credits will not take revenue from your debt service funds, and therefore you can make the 100% payment to the bondholders. That is something that helps bondholders feel a lot better about buying bonds, knowing that the circuit breaker is not going to wipe that fund out. Oh, I skipped one. Sorry. So that means that the debt service funds and lease rental payment funds are not subject to circuit breaker loss. The tax rate associated with debt funds is included, so it adds to the circuit breaker calculation. However, the one circuit breaker credit that does apply to protected taxes is the over 65. I've got a sample example on this slide. The taxing unit circuit breaker loss is $100,000. We show 4 funds here, and the debt service fund accounts for 25% of the total tax rate. As you can see, the $100,000 circuit breaker amount is allocated to the non-debt service funds, and the amount, therefore, is increased. The amount of the circuit breaker loss is increased for those funds. Now, there is a provision in the circuit breaker chapter that allows units to reallocate those credits associated with debt service fund. You don't have to worry about that as the county when you're making settlement. That's not your problem. You only have to worry about your own if you have this situation. But we will be providing instructions on how to do that this year shortly. Now, this is the end of my presentation. My contact information is here. I've also included the website address, and if you want to contact someone else at the department, we have a great contact page. It lists everyone, and if you're not sure who your field rep is, or you're not sure how to reach them, you go to the budget field representatives section, and off to the right just a bit in that same box is a map. So you click on that map and it's going to show you who is assigned to your county and what their phone number is. So with that, I'll take any questions. And it's okay to ask anything. If I don't know the answer, I'll get it for you. Oh, yeah.
Okay, I just want to clarify the 10-day time period from the time that the Form 3 has to be submitted before 10 days before the public hearing, and the public hearing has to be at least 10 days before budget adoption. Is that 10 calendar days or 10 calendar? Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Does anyone else have questions? Oh, my eyesight is going.
I was just curious as to how we can educate our county councils on non-binding reviews when their thought process is, well, it doesn't matter what we think, DLGF's basically going to do with the budget whatever. We have a real struggle in our county to get them to understand that we will not get a budget if they don't go through this process. They look at the forms, but we need some help here. We need some guidelines on how to educate them the importance of this, and it's real frustrating.
Right.
We know what we need to do, but they don't always listen.
Right. It sounds like you've made a valiant attempt, and I guess I would just kind of turn that back to the audience. Is there anybody who struggled with that and then was able to turn their counsel around? You know, that's not allowed. So just show of hands, do other counties have that same problem with their councils? Yeah, yeah. A lot. So I guess just off the top of my head, when, you know, and you're probably already doing this, so forgive me if this is Mr. Obvious stuff, but when you give them the documentation, just preface it with the fact that it is a state law, that it has to be done, and that it is important for them because, as you said, you know, you've said it before to them, but I guess just keep trying. If I think of anything, I'll talk about that with the office. What county are you with? Hancock? I'll talk about that with the folks at the office and see if anybody has run into a situation where they've been able to turn around. But yeah, you know, it's a fairly recent law. Maybe it's just going to take time. Oh, Courtney.
I'm going to jump in just for a second and do an absolutely shameless plug for the County Council meeting on June 20th. We will be covering County Council non-binding review. So certainly if you are experiencing issues, as much as you can do to push them to the June 20th session, we will cover it there. We will cover the possible penalties there as well. So hopefully that would help. So sorry, it just seemed like a good opportunity to push that one.
Yeah.
And I wanted to follow up just real quick on that calendar date question about the 10 days. One thing to keep in mind is that the day that you submit is day 0. So day 1 starts on the day after you submit into Gateway. You may hold your public hearing or do your budget adoption. There we go. All right, you can actually complete the task, whether it's a public hearing or adoption, on day 10. But just make sure you don't count the day that you submit as one of your calendar days. So.
Does anyone else have questions? Oh, why do you do one to the other? Go with both.
Yeah, my chief deputy said I could probably talk loud enough. The question I have is, again, about non-binary review. We had a local library board last year who elected to go with a voluntary binding review. And I never could quite understand the perspective for doing that. Do you have any opinions on that?
No, I am not familiar with that situation either. Did they give any explanation?
No, they really didn't give any. Just they wanted us to give them a binding review, and so it just kind of floored me, frankly, to think that they would do that
Yeah.
voluntarily, but they did.
Yeah. What county are you with?
Grant County.
Grant?
It was the Upland Library, the Barton, Pogues, Reeves,
Let me
whatever.
check back at the office. I'll shoot you
All
an
right,
email.
thanks, appreciate it.
Does anyone else have questions? Oh, cool, up front.
I have a question, another question on the binding and the non-binding review. I know that with the libraries, the county council should be looking at the growth quotient in relation to the budget. But what about the other units? Should they be basing their recommendation on whether the levy is exceeding the growth quotient or the budget? Or what should in other words, what should the council be looking at in order to make this recommendation that most of them think is not necessary or important?
Yeah, that's a great question. I did not dive into that part of the law. Courtney, did you hear that? Do you want to take that? What is the county council actually looking at when they do their review? I apologize, I haven't gotten to that section.
Yeah, so what they look at will actually differ depending on the county. We've seen all sorts of different reviews come through. Some counties will simply say, hey, keep it under AVGQ and we're good. Some counties will get very, very detailed about what they include in their recommendation. There's at least one county that does kind of, I always joke, it's a little bit of a choose your own adventure of if you're at this, these are our recommendations for you. If you're doing this, this is what our recommendation is. And it's all good. There is no statutory guidance on exactly what they're supposed to be looking at. They are simply, well, there is what they're supposed to be looking at, but in terms of what the recommendation has to include, there's nothing statutory on that. So on the county council review form, when it prints out, it would have the comparison to both the statewide AVGQ and the county AVGQ, and then also it should have a comparison to the increases done by the other units, but there's nothing that is really required to be in the recommendation itself. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, good, right up front.
Okay. On the binding adoption, that's the libraries only, and is that with boards that are not elected?
Right, and I think would that also be like a solid waste district, some other boards within the county that have a tax levy?
Okay, so then what the county council does with those is binding?
Yes.
Then, so they actually set their budgets for them? Okay.
They'll propose a budget and submit it to you, or to the county, and then the county council has binding adoption.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you, Susan.
Thank you. Thank you all.